ahead and start. We are very excited that you're able to join in today. And we have three speakers, but our first speaker is not showing up. So we're going to go ahead and move to Dr. John Lewis from Lipscomb University. And Dr. Lewis will be talking to us today about reflective writing as a tool to assess self-learning in a faith and science course. Thank you. And please go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
Okay. So my name is Dr. John Lewis. I'm in the biology department at Lipscomb University. And at our university, we teach a course called Biology Capstone. Our school is affiliated with the Churches of Christ, and they have been loath to create a course that has evolution in the title. So we have Biology Capstone, which is really an origins course. We talk about the origin of the universe, the origin of Earth. We do talk a whole lot about biological evolution, including human evolution, a little bit of the history of science. I have a variety of speakers come in, a physicist from our school. We have theologians from the College of Bible that come in and talk to students about interpreting scripture. But this is just a 2-hour course for our senior biology majors. So we cram a lot in. Over the years, I've used a variety of materials for this course, from pulling readings from the classical literature. But in the past couple of years, I've started using the book that the Wheaton professors put together about understanding origins, because I find that it compiles a lot of the information I was covering kind of in one spot for the students. But a lot of this is overwhelming for our students. They have to do a lot of reading. They don't know which parts to kind of pick out. And so I created an assignment called What I Learned This Month to help them reflect on what they've been learning and how they've come to know that in this particular course. So the rationale behind this is holistic learning. Learning in general has at least 3 components, and there's lots of people that have written about this that are into pedagogy. I'm not classically trained in education. Most of us with PhDs in the sciences get TA positions, might get a little bit of training, but they don't teach you how to teach. But I've found Fink's book about learning to be helpful. And they say that holistic learning has these 3 components: information and ideas, experiences. In my discipline, this is labs and that sort of thing. And then one that we sometimes leave out is reflecting. They set it up this way, with information and ideas being primary literature, memorizing facts. In the biological sciences, there's taxonomy to learn, things like that. We have experiences in laboratories and field trips, things like that. But that's pretty much the bread and butter for our freshmen, sophomores, and even some of our junior classes. So in this senior class, what I try to do is get students to reflect on what they're learning and how they're learning it. One thing that is true is when you leave college, you no longer have a professor telling you what you are supposed to know, what you're supposed to read. And so knowing how you know things and learning how to learn, I think, is an important life skill for these students as they graduate. So there have been some other studies that have shown that self-reflection is a really good way to help the ideas that you're covering in your courses to stick for students. Just rote memorization is kind of in one ear and they regurgitate for the test and then they forget. But if they have to reflect, then that is a more effective learning technique. And Dunlowski's study showed that durable learning, which they measured in terms of retention, really they didn't come up with a whole lot of components that were good for creating durable learning. But one of those was reflective exercises, but they expressed the need for more research in this area about how to teach students how to learn and how to create durable learning that sticks with students. So this is kind of my first step in this. This is not a quantitative study or anything like that. So I'm basically going to talk about this assignment and show you some examples of student writings, and then I'd love to hear your feedback. Also, I put the entire assignment in the files. If you're interested, you're welcome to co-opt this for your own course if you teach a course like this. Modify it. If you do that, let me know, though. I have no like copyright issues or anything like that, but if you use it, I'd like to hear about it in the future. So I also violate one of my rules as a professor, which is I put a lot of text on this slide, but I try to bold stuff that I thought was important. I want them to develop their abilities to self-assess their learning. And hopefully that helps them take charge of their own education. And this time when they reflect over what they've learned over the past month or the past unit should be a period of self-reflection and of synthesis of ideas. Synthesis of ideas is another area where many students lack. They know how to take ideas of others and then give them back to you, but lots of students have trouble taking ideas from several different places and then creating their own new idea or synthesizing those ideas into a coherent whole. And so this exercise hopefully creates a situation where they do that. So I tell them sit down with their reading notes for that unit and review basically all the notes that they have for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and think about what significant things that they've learned and which of their notes best represents that learning. And then I have them pick 3 of those themes that best represent what they've learned. So this is a class where I'm less concerned that they know the names and dates of every specific person that's covered in the textbook. But I would like for them to be able to give a narrative of kind of the history of science or how we know that the Earth is old and what are some objections to that and what are the scientific methods we use to know that. So I try to get them to pick themes that aren't overlapping and then write an essay. And here's how their essay begins. They start with kind of a self-portrait of where they were as a student of evolution and religion from the time the class started up until the end of this first unit. For the first one they write, they kind of have to write it as a person coming into this class. What did you expect? But these first paragraphs kind of leapfrog each other. They write kind of where they are up to the beginning of that particular unit. The middle of the essay is 3 paragraphs documenting the themes that they picked out, briefly describing what the theme or what the information was, but I kind of agree with them that we both know what the information is. They don't need to regurgitate that. But to talk more about why that information matters to them, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So they have 3 of those body paragraphs. Then their last paragraph is just where they are now at the end of this unit, after we've covered micro and macro evolution and Darwin, after we've covered human evolution, after we've covered origin of the Earth and origin of the universe, that sort of thing. So what I tell them I'm looking for is I want you to prove that you've learned something in this last unit. Describe how you learned it, and then explain in a compelling way why it matters to you. I tell them I do not want a summary of their notes. So here's some examples, and this is like an entire paragraph, opening paragraph from a student. The key things here I pulled out were, they're talking about how their view on evolution and religion was based on what they'd read in the Bible and have learned growing up in church. But then they talk about how they really started to notice that they lack a scientific aspect to their point of view. So this is what I would consider a good opening paragraph. Here's another introductory paragraph in a unit where we covered age of the universe and age of the earth. I have them read Roger Wien's article from ASA about radiometric dating, but they talk about how they heard evidence that they'd never been exposed to before. and have changed their understanding. Wien's writings help them understand why scientists say the Earth is old, and where the disputes come from. And I found that really helpful. In terms of body paragraphs, this is what I would consider a poor response. This student says, I was unaware that the universe was dynamic. But most of the essay, or most of this paragraph, is just a regurgitation of the information that was given, that the universe is isotropic and homogeneous. The most I knew about the universe was that there's planets and they revolve around the sun. And so even their concluding statement here is, basically just a fact that we've covered, and not how it has impacted their faith. And so that student got marked off for that. This one was just a really short one that the student wrote. There was also kind of a poor paragraph. They do talk about how they grew up hearing the story about Adam and Eve, but they don't really integrate any of the information that we read in class with that. So they're talking a lot about me, and I, but they're not integrating it with material that we covered in class. This again is a really long one. Focus on the bold. But in this one, this is what I would consider a good body paragraph. This was in the unit where we covered the origin of species and Darwin. And this student gives an example. Christian individuals simply shut down because of disbelief. So some personal experience there, and some personal application here. I find it critical to bring both perspectives in the conversation. I can't have one without the other. These are science majors who are sometimes struggling and sometimes are okay with figuring out how faith and science work together. Sometimes they just need language to use to talk to family, to talk to church members, their friends about it. Another good example of a body paragraph. This one says, understanding macroevolution and common descent challenged my brain, but what I was taught in church. So they're integrating what they were taught in church with what we were learning in class. And identifies later in the paragraph that these picturesque Bible stories they were told as a child, and now the application of science to some of those puts them in an uncomfortable place to be in their faith. And so they are obviously engaging with the material on a personal level at this point, which is really my goal, to get them to think and to get them to engage with the material. Here's another good body paragraph. This was when we were talking about Harzma and Harzma's 5 definitions of evolution, and those have been used other places. They're used in the Wheaton book as well. But they were talking about the gaps in language that scares the church. And they've realized on a personal level that it's important for them to explain what they mean by evolution when they're talking to other people about it. This student is one of our bioscience and philosophy majors. And so she integrated some of the learning that she'd done in her philosophy classes and had realized, oh, there's a connection here. And that's a great aha moment as a professor when a student says, oh, you mean this Greek philosophy stuff that I talked about can connect to what I'm learning about the history of science and religion. That's a great connection for us. And then in concluding paragraphs, tend to go like this. At the beginning of the unit, I was like this. I was close-minded to evolution in this case. And then I realized, and goes on to state what they realized. So this student said, that they look forward to continuing to reconcile their belief system and what they, how they're going to integrate faith and science. Here's another one. This person's still in a similar place, and I tell them that's okay too. I'm not there to change their mind or wreck their world, but I am there to make them think. So this student said, it's given me pause to realize others don't see the world like I do. This student, I remember specifically, was a 4.0 straight A student and didn't have a whole lot of time for people's opinions that that he thought were foolish or didn't make sense. And he recognizes that in himself. So, again, self-reflection about it. So to send some take-home messages with you, I think that reflective writing done well really enhances my students' personal engagement with this type of material. In the future, some kind of quantitative approach would probably be best, especially if I were to try to publish this. And, doing pre and post class kind of surveys. I do some survey work, but it's not really, it's mostly anecdotal. It's not it's not publishable like a sociological study would be. But anecdotal comments I get from students, comments from them on the course survey suggest that this activity is meeting these goals of retention and engagement for faith and science material. So that's all I have. There's some references. This Fink book is really good. It made me think about how I teach and kind of how I compartmentalize things when I teach. But I think we have 3 or 4 minutes for some questions, maybe.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for presenting this self-reflective exercise. I think it's very useful and helpful for a lot of us who teach science and integrate faith. I have a question, Dr. Lewis.
Okay.
So the self-reflective exercise, do you typically offer it as a one-time thing during the session, or is it a weekly activity, or is it a quarterly activity? How often do you offer it?
Yeah, so it's titled "What I Learned This Month." So we do one every 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
After the first 2.5 weeks of class, I have them do a practice one that I grade pretty rigorously, so they know what to expect. And it's low point value. It's kind of their first draft, and then after another 3 to 4 weeks, we do 3 more of those throughout the semester that are higher point values. But it's a significant portion of their grade.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to cram in like the whole context thing. I had some other slides if I got to them. Our university is affiliated with the Churches of Christ. And in any biology class that I teach, people with Churches of Christ background make up about 30%, but the rest of them are all over the place. We have a lot of Coptic Orthodox Egyptian students in our program. I'll have 2 to 3 Muslim students in my courses because our pre-med program is good. Then they put up with the Jesus stuff to be able to get in medical schools. Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, So part of it's like getting them to recognize, hey, not everybody coming into this class has the same, they didn't go to this private Christian school you did. They don't have the same church upraising that you did.
John, how long has the department taught the course, and how long have you taught it?
I've taught it for about 7 years. The department started teaching, I think back when they first started teaching, they taught it as population ecology, but they were covering a lot of like Ernst Mayr's work. They would cover the modern synthesis and kind of the history, but it was kind of the biology department's way of getting in some of the evolution material without calling that in a more conservative time. Lipscomb's really loosened up on a lot of that stuff. But I think there's still some hesitation from the administration, mainly because of donors, to be frank. But
is this the single place in your major curriculum where students are taught evolutionary theory?
Well, no. So I teach a freshman, we teach a freshman sequence that's molecular half and then organismal half. And I've taught the organismal half of that for several years. And we talk about natural selection and Darwin. I know in microbiology, they talk about disease resistance and, MRSA and, adaptation, but they don't talk about it in like with a historical context. Some of them don't really put it together that, oh, this is evolution. They just see it as like, microbes are adapting, or in virology, they talk about how viruses can change and adapt, but they don't put it together in the big picture. Students are really good at compartmentalizing.
Well, from your descriptions and the things the students were saying, it appears that this course is essentially a humanities type course for your students. Is that right? That they're not learning a great deal of additional science per se. They're learning more about the human side of science. Is that right?
That's right. They're learning more about how to integrate, their faith with what science they've learned. Now, we do go into like speciation and some things that I know aren't covered in that freshman class. Some of that overlaps with what I teach in ecology, but the molecular biology majors don't have to take ecology.
Well, all of the effective science capstone courses I've seen at various institutions are essentially humanities courses,
right?
Taught within science, and if I would urge your department to consider letting you make it a 3-credit course, and if necessary, cutting 1 credit somewhere else so that the major doesn't get larger. When we created the one at Messiah 30 years ago, the chemistry department actually cut an entire 3-credit course in order that their majors could take the single science capstone for all science majors. They wanted it badly enough to do that. The biologists didn't need to do that, but the chemists did, and they wanted to do it. And so it's because it's a different kind of experience when properly taught, in my view, than anything else they've had, and it's integrative with humanities questions and disciplines. And that's partly why we require philosophy of all of our science majors.
Right.
So they have to take a philosophy class before they take the science capstone. And that does ease the road for conversation on a lot of the issues.
Yeah. My bioscience and philosophy majors that take this definitely start at a different place because they have some of that language that can be obstructive to other students. And some of our students will take like Bible minors. And so those students start at a slightly different place. But yeah, I would love for it to be a 3-hour course and expand that to not just biology majors, but to all of our sciences. Chemistry doesn't have a similar course.
You could design a class that's broadly scientific. A little less given to biology and more to the philosophical, historical foundations of science collectively, and let the chemistry students come take it. They might, their department maybe would want that. I just encourage you to have a conversation like that. I don't know whether you have any physics majors at Lipscomb, but the same can be done for them. They're part of our capstone too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, everyone, for your questions.